Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, we hear how they are improving Pyro's locations with what they have learnt from the Stanton system. Alpha 324 saw a couple of patches released for the Evocati, plus we learn about the new cargo missions and what to expect from them when Alpha 324 drops. That is not to be missed. So over this last week, there were two Evocati PTU tests for Alpha 324. The first one was up for a few hours while I was sleeping, whereas the second test remained up throughout the next day, in which I was able to get on and play. Now I have covered the patch notes and my experience of Alpha 324 in a couple of separate videos, which I will link in the description below, so you can hear about how this very exciting patch is progressing. Now, there was another patch released last night with some more tweaks and bug fixes, which I will cover in a separate video soon. I would just like to get a bit more of a hands-on first. But things are moving along nicely, and although it's more likely the patch will remain with the Evocati for the duration of this week, if I was to guess, I certainly do hope we see it progress to Wave 1 as soon as possible. Now, I will continue to cover all of the patch notes as they release, plus I will try to play it as much as possible, time dependent, so that I can provide as much information on my experience. But after hearing about the new cargo missions in Star Citizen Live this week, which we will get to in a second, I am super stoked to play it. It is worth sticking around to hear the breakdown of the Star Citizen Live episode, as they are really pushing the cargo profession in 324. So this week's Inside Star Citizen was another episode where they speak with a team, this time being the level design team, and hear about their process and what they have learned from building out the Stanton system, applying those lessons to the Pyro system. Now, they say that level design is kind of a bridge between gameplay and the environments, helping to bring them together to make a cohesive environment with lots of things for the players to do. And the level design team tried to ensure that there is readability or clarity with the environment, so everybody knows where to go or what to do, understanding everything about a particular location. Flow is also very important to provide a good composition, giving options for how to move through each environment. Options is also very important too, for how players can complete their objectives, giving choice for what they might want to do. For example, it might be full-on combat, or stealthing somewhere, or maybe there's puzzles to get through. Then they focus on clustering, which is again more of a compositional technique, where the layout of a location is brought together to make environments feel more natural. And this in particular, they feel they have not really done a good enough job of this in Stanton, so moving forward with the Pyro system, they say they're taking a renewed effort to cluster things properly. And then finally, scale and proportion, which is important to ensure things range from the small to large, to kind of give those wow moments, which I must say Star Citizen does do very well, especially as the ships and locations are very large or very small, depending on where you are. But also they have all that close-up detail too, so transitioning from a small environment to a large environment does feel very monumental at times. Now for Pyro, they have done all of this for various locations. For example, as you approach a large structure in the distance because it caught your eye, as you get closer to it you will see maybe a small village, and then down the hill might be a refinery, but as you get close and then land, you will see just how big this original structure is that drew you in initially. Now, the process of building out a location for level design is to firstly ideate, sort of conceptualize or plan out what they want. Then it is to head into the editor and white box out the location to get the metrics sorted, which is in 3D, but very, very basic shapes. And this helps them to also block out everything in that location and get the metrics right. Then they hand it to art to grey box, and that is them getting things looking pretty, and then it goes to final art to really establish the feel of the location. But even after a level has been released, they continue to maintain it, like fixing bugs for example, but they also go back and add new gameplay elements as and when they become available. They also have to coordinate with other teams like lighting, audio, narrative, mission teams, environment art and so on, just to make sure that everything works well, and they all work together to achieve what they're after. Now for Pyro's stations, or space stations, they really want to provide a much nicer flow compared to that of the Stanton system, as the Stanton space stations are very much elevator rides anytime you want to go anywhere. So for Pyro stations, they have sort of grouped the clinic and hubs alongside the shopping area to make it more compact, while also offering a lot of places to discover as you explore. And for ground locations or outposts, each location will have its own identity. For example, one might be more oriented to combat, another for social aspects or puzzle gameplay, allowing players to really discover more and feel rewarded for doing so. And also, once you land at one of these locations, they say you won't have to walk too far to get on with, say, trading. If you're landing at a trading outpost, the buildings where you trade will be closer to the landing pads, which they also want to encourage the use of ground vehicles for cargo and so on. Now, for space stations, I certainly like the idea that we won't have to be riding elevators every time we want to go anywhere. That is a win for sure. But for ground locations, it is handy having stuff that you need close by to where you might be landing. But what I do like in games is where it might move you through an environment to get to where you need to go, showing you more of what that location has to offer, rather than just land, go to the nearest building, load up your ship, and then fly off. So hopefully there is a lot of variation to these places to cater for all scenarios, as I am very much a explorer and loot goblin. Anyway, they also mentioned that there will be roads connecting various points of interest within settlements, meaning we will have a reason to actually drive a vehicle from one place to another, rather than just hopping in your ship and flying down. And with the Pyro system being quite a dangerous place, they want to also make sure that there is enough potential cover found throughout all the environments in case you need to get down. Now, they say there is a lot of things to consider when designing a level, especially for an MMO like Star Citizen, and they want to hit everything well for the Pyro system, and although it wasn't mentioned, they will certainly be going back through the older locations to add more of what they have learned wherever possible. Right now, they are wanting to spend more time on getting more content in, rather than spending the majority of the time on the visuals, and they are doing so for Pyro, which is great to hear, with the plan to also make both Pyro and Stanton, and I suppose any other system, less boring and more enjoyable, offering lots of gameplay content that we can just discover on our own. So a great episode there, and some really nice insight into what is coming for Pyro 4.0 and beyond, and I am definitely excited to check out more of what Pyro has to offer. Anyway, that was Inside Star Citizen. Let's get to Star Citizen Live. So this week's Star Citizen Live was another game dev episode, which is technically more about showing the process of how something in-game is built, rather than divulging a lot of information about the game. However, this week's episode, called Making Missions Number 2, took us through the process of how a new hauling mission is created, like the new ones that are coming in Alpha 3.2.4, which we are yet to properly see. So there was a lot of interesting information in this episode, and all we hear about in this show is coming with Alpha 3.2.4's cargo missions, unless stated otherwise, which is really exciting to learn more about what to expect in this patch on its way out next. So starting with the fact that there was an economy team member as well, sat with the mission designer, who says that Alpha 3.2.4 brings a new updated economy, which we kind of knew, but it does sound like the changes are going to be a lot broader than I personally realised. So firstly, it was stated that when they kicked off this whole process of looking into designing new hauling missions, they looked at Spectrum to see what backers wanted in this area, and they understand that right now there is a large amount of credits needed, really, along with a pretty big ship required to make any decent amount of profit, especially when it comes to commodity trading. So this is something that they are wanting to consider a lot more, combining the cargo hauling and commodity trading with the economy, which should expand over the next few patches, and it sounds like that's starting with 3.2.4. Now, they have a large logistical document that maps out all of the connections between the various Stanton system locations. For example, cargo coming from another system gets transported to a LEO station, and then from there to a planet's distribution center, and then to an outpost. And each of these journeys will require different ships with different sizes of cargo holds that will make gameplay for players, and these distances will scale accordingly as well. And so taking this logistical document, they mapped out all of the various locations on all of the planets and moons in Stanton, as you can see, Hurston, with every single structure and how they connect to each other, basically stretching across the system. Now, I'm really happy to see this, as it starts to establish the trade lanes and the variation of potential jobs connecting each. Now this is just the starting point for trading and hauling missions to be more thoroughly fleshed out, and although this does bring with it a big economy update in Alpha 3.2.4, this does not include the quantum simulation, which is expected later on, more likely around the Star Citizen 1.0, which would be my guess. But Jared did say that they are hoping to get Benoit from the Montreal studio on a show before the end of this year to talk more about the ongoing development of this quantum simulation. So it certainly doesn't sound like it's going to be a 4.0 thing, more likely in time for Star Citizen's kind of official Persistent Universe release. Now from there they took one commodity, being titanium, and traced its route throughout the various locations. They have also mapped out what each planet and moon is mostly made of, like Hurston being primarily made from iron, whereas titanium is found mostly around the moons of Crusader. And by the way, they say that this information is determined by the economy team, and then that information is shared with the teams who place all of the minables as well, which helps to determine what materials should make up the majority of what cargo being hauled in these hauling missions. So it should make a lot of sense, although I do feel like the narrative team might have a heavy part to play in determining what the main material makeup of each celestial body is as well. Anyway, this raw ore is to be mostly mined at mining outposts, and these locations will specifically have you moving ore to stations like the Leo stations or the Lagrange stations, and then they will be transported to places like L1 refinery stations. So I suppose there will be missions requiring players in smaller ships to visit these mining outposts. As we heard, large ships aren't really supposed to go to these places, but smaller ships will load up their ships and then take them to the Leos and then unload them, at which point someone with a bigger ship could take a larger consignment to the L1 station, and so on. So missions are going to scale accordingly to the location and size of standard cargo units available, making smaller hauling ships a lot more useful. Now, titanium, they say, is a very heavily used commodity, and it is to be used in places like Lorville for construction of buildings, or places like Crusader for shipbuilding, plus many of the locations use it for decorations and tools and such, so it should have a much more reasonable value, and essentially forget everything that you know about commodity prices in the live build right now, as 3.2.4 will be changing a lot of this. And as you can see here, with the solar and interstellar trade routes, it actually outlines trade lanes that I suspect over time will see a lot more established infrastructure to support that footfall, especially regarding security. So as CIG see the amount of activity in certain areas and see these trade lanes kind of naturally form, I wouldn't be surprised if they do bring in maybe some security posts along with other infrastructure, maybe just to help with the amount of traffic going there. And for the interstellar routes, jobs requiring deliveries to jump point stations will represent goods kind of moving to and from other systems in 3.2.4, but for Alpha 4.0 with Pyro, there will be goods actually getting moved from system to system, and then of course as they add more systems like Nyx and Magda and Terra, we will see much more interstellar travel for hauling as well. Now, every one of these connections are missions requiring players to load, travel, and then unload goods, and these have been set up for every single commodity in game, so no longer will we just be looking at the higher value commodities, there will be something for everyone. Of course, higher value goods will still be available for you to earn from, but they might come with a much higher risk as well. Now, I love the scale that they are expanding these missions to. I feel like there will be something for everybody, from your small starter ship hauler all the way up to your Hull C and beyond. It is excellent news. Now, the mission that they made is to take unrefined titanium from Seraphim Station to the Crew L1 station, or the refinery station. And although I wasn't planning to go through the full process of how they build out the mission, I found it very informative and kind of explains what to expect when it comes to these missions, so I did so anyway. Now, they mentioned that commodity trading is still very much to be a big part of Star Citizen's hauling, but for those without the capital to risk, these hauling contracts of all scales will allow players to experience this gameplay while also earning reputation with the hauling guild that is providing these contracts. Now, these contracts will show the amount of standard cargo units, the pay and the time frame required to complete the job, and the potential threat or level of danger, so essentially allowing anyone with any level or size of ship or level of capital to progress. And Jared did say that we will see some examples of these missions in action in about 2 weeks on Inside Star Citizen, but next week's Star Citizen Live will be playing through this mission that they've just built. Now, they also spoke further about the EVR, which stands for Effort versus Reward, and this is a universal algorithm that allows Cloud Imperium to essentially balance the effort anyone puts into something in the game with the reward that they should receive for doing so, with the reward being Alpha UEC, reputation, and all other manner of things, basically allowing them to create a baseline for a fair reward based on the time and difficulty, but there are many other variables as well. It is not as black and white as effort versus reward. There are so many other factors involved. Now, they showed something called grade progression, which shows all of the levels of mission difficulty and ranks as you progress through them, from intro to small grade being very early jobs and lasting a small duration, to then leveling up to something called supply grade and bulk grade. And this will determine what kind of missions you will see, starting out with very low value, low risk, and low quantity jobs, unlocking higher paid jobs with larger levels of standard cargo units to move, with some of them being very valuable, and of course potentially running into pirates, either PvE or PvP. Now, they didn't specify how much standard cargo units each grade allows, so going from small grade to supply and then bulk, but it was said that the supply grade mission would be around 80 to 112 standard cargo units. Now, bear in mind, any numbers we see during this show are just placeholders, kind of best guesses at this time. They will certainly change, so pay no real attention to them, but it does give us a vague idea. Now, this sort of variable adds variety and range for what missions they want and can do, which may require players doing a single job in multiple runs, which I never even considered. So it's kind of great that you can take a mission on with a greater SEU size than your cargo's capacity, and instead of doing it in one go, which you won't be able to, you can take multiple trips. So very cool, not limiting players based on their ship's SEU. Of course, it does require a lot more work for the payout. You're traveling essentially twice the distance. But if the payout's worth it, make that trip. Now, they then had a few drop-downs giving calculations for the mission difficulty, which shows whether it's, or the terminology they use is hands-free, zero risk, easy PvE, normal PvE, or even a easy or hard PvP, I guess it could be one or the other, multiplayer PvE or expert PvP action, then PvE, PvP large group action, for example, warzone hauling, so actually taking goods into a location that is at war, which is going to be not for everybody, but I can imagine how intense that would be with a fully crewed ship trying to bring in supplies for one side while they are under siege or in battle. That is going to be amazing. Now, this is all very interesting with the available choice here. That will, of course, impact the potential payout, but I'm sure they will add a lot more to this as well. Plus, just because a mission doesn't have intentional combat assigned, it is still possible that it can happen, in particular regarding PvP. But that's something that will be addressed as time goes on, especially in the Stanton system, where it's not supposed to be as PvP orientated as somewhere like Pyro, but there is plenty more to that anyway. Now, from here, we had mission complications, from no-brainer to I could do this in my sleep, routine light work, moments of intense concentration, under constant pressure, extremely hard to solo and will need help, and logistically complex, not soloable. So again, a lot more variables there to determine everything, from how much you need to think about what you're doing to potentially even needing extra crew to complete the job. Now, other difficulty options include potential energy requirements, so safe and sound, barely breaking a sweat, minimal danger, FPS, not ship action, ship could get damaged and lose cargo, player and ship might be lost, or is likely to, or is most certain without help. And then finally, what level of skill the pilot might need, like noob level, understanding how to walk in FPS, shoot, or use your MOBI-glass, flight mechanics like docking and quantum travel, a standard or expert level of understanding of FPS and flight, pro understanding of optimal tactics, the next one being called basically a dev, and then know how to beat Avenger 1. Again, these are internal difficulty terms. and most likely not going to be the set terms. They're just having a bit of fun here. But this particular mission that they chose was determined as an easy mission, as they basically clicked the basic versions of each. From there, they then choose the time frame for the mission, and for, he says, around 95 standard cargo units, that will take about 4 to 5 minutes to load. Being an average, of course, if you're good at this, you can do it quicker. If you're not too good, it'll take longer. But these will be, if it's 95 SEU, chances are you will be moving larger containers rather than 95 single SEU containers. So a total of about 9 minutes with the loading and unloading. Travel time, with it being a quick quantum travel without any transitions through orbit, will be about a minute, which for this specific mission, the whole job should take around 10 minutes. And then this generates a payout of 4,250 Alpha UEC, which of course is just an example and will very much be based on many other factors. Not to mention, we have just seen a single mission, so if it seems too low, bear in mind this is a 10-minute mission, but also do not compare the mission earnings and values of how much things cost based on the current live build, as 324's values are very different, and it will continue to get balanced over time. And for another example, or another mission example, you could be doing a mission that requires you to haul between 244 and 432 standard cargo units, which could require a multiple pick-up and drop-off mission. So packing your cargo hold correctly is important, making sure the goods for the early drop-offs are at the back door, easy to access first, which I think is great and will actually require some thinking. But this mission could see you getting pirated, and it might be pretty difficult, making it a medium difficulty mission, with the time required to complete it being around 43 minutes to load and unload your cargo on your own. You could use a crew, of course, get it done quicker. That would decrease the time. But there is also 3 multiple orbit transitions required, so it could take about an hour to complete the mission, which would result in around a 46,500 Alpha UEC payout. Now, that one seems pretty reasonable, but it is important to note that these are all just variables where player choice and ability will play hugely into this. So it really shows just how scalable these missions can be and the range of missions that will be available in 324, giving players more choice in what they want to do and how much danger they want to put themselves in. So that is pretty much how they are going to make these hauling missions in the verse. It is that simple and that quick. That mission is done, by the way. When they click through all that, it will generate the mission, and then you'll see on the MOBIGLASS Contracts Manager how it now previews the mission objectives so that you can see exactly what is required. Now, also, some other things to note, that boxes are real commodity boxes owned by the corporation and will be marked as stolen if you choose to do so, and will need to be sold at a fence at a much lower price. Also, a buy-in for missions will still exist, but for these specific hauling missions, no buy-in is required. Now, if a box does get damaged, goes missing, or you run out of time, there will be an early mission completion option, which allows you to sort of gain a partial reward and payout if you choose to do so, or a partial slap on the wrist and reputation damage if you don't do very well. So, for example, losing 80% of your cargo would give you a very big reputation hit, and you would not really be able to work for that company for quite a while. Now, other rewards aside from credits and whatnot can be handled by this EVR algorithm, and the reputation system will include rewards too, plus they want to expand on the reward system in general for missions to give non-alpha UEC rewards, but they don't want to talk about that here as it is a different team handling that. So hopefully, from what we heard at CitizenCon, where you can earn ship skins and uniforms and other items of, I suppose, company memorabilia as part of your reward, might be coming in 324. It certainly sounds like it, but they didn't want to talk about it because it's not their purview. Now, also, a design for hauling vehicles is in the works, but it won't be for this release for 324. They are just making use of the updated resource containers, which range from 1 to 32 SEU. New commodities have been added. They can't remember what they are. And for 324, almost all commodities will be used for the hauling missions, as well as quantum fuel, hydrogen fuel, and ship ammunition and such, which they say are actual commodities that get used by the players when they request a refuel. So it sounds like as a player goes to a station and then gets more fuel, this could be, I suppose, a planet-sized station or a space station, If they refuel, that location then will request a mission for players to deliver more fuel to them based on the supply and demand. So great to hear that that is in effect with these hauling missions, but of course the much more further evolved version of this will come with the quantum simulation. For Alpha 324, all missions will require you to bring a vehicle, but in the future they will be adding missions that allow you to use a company vehicle as such, so it's already provided for you. NPC ships moving goods in the verse will eventually be both physical and non-physical. This is all part of the quantum simulation. As you will see NPCs physically moving things around, but the vast majority of them will be in the background as kind of lightweight AI entities, so not physicalized, you won't see them. But if you're at places like landing zones and whatnot, then you will see a few more of them flying around. So it's kind of a mixture, but it will also heavily depend on performance. Now, as more players are able to join a single server, as we can see with the tech preview tests, they do say that you will begin to see more players moving along these trade lanes and at these shipping locations, giving a much greater sense of activity, which is going to be very nice. And I already see this at these settlements that I go to, since a lot of people have started doing the sort of off-grid stuff. It feels like a community is actually present now. And as these cargo boxes are part of a mission, you will have markers for them. So if you were pirated and a player steals these cargo boxes, you could effectively go after the pirates and retrieve your cargo, if possible, or you could hire someone to go after them. And in the future, you could just gather more of that stolen commodity and then deliver it instead via the, mining. You could mine some more iron if it was stolen and deliver it that way, from what I understand. Also, if a pirate does gain crime stat of 3 and above, that will generate a bounty mission. However, I can't imagine whoever the bounty hunter is will think, oh, this must be some cargo that they've stolen from a player, let me go and deliver it to them. That would, I suppose, need to be communicated via chat. Anyway, that was this week's Star Citizen Live. It was a bit of a beast, which I did not expect at all, hence the delay in getting this video out. Next Friday, as they say, they will be playing through this mission live, so I cannot wait to see how it works. Inside Star Citizen next week is a dev diary on server meshing, so you won't see any gameplay, but it will tell us about how all of these tech preview server meshing tests have gone, so extremely interested in that one. But that was a great episode of Star Citizen Live with a ton of revealing information about what to expect when 324 drops with these cargo missions. There is going to be a ton of stuff to do. And it's not going to be for everybody. Some people won't want to have to move boxes by hand. There will obviously be the automated timer with a bit of an added cost to it. But for me personally, I have been waiting for this for so long. Anyway, with that said, let us move on. So also this week, the latest Galactopedia was released, which was a great read, especially for any lore buff. The roadmap was updated as well, although there wasn't much to see in this one, with the notable changes being Alpha 324's features, being storage access, freight elevators, the new cargo hauling missions, personal and instanced hangars, and the blockade runner event now committed to the build. So great to see those features get committed, but ultimately not the most exciting update. The latest jump point is available. I am yet to read this, so no spoilers please. And finally, MONSTERTECH and Star Citizen have teamed up to create some very cool ship-branded flight seats, with RSI, Mirai, and Anvil currently the 3 available. Now, the chairs look very cool and allow you to attach all sorts of MONSTERTECH mounts to them to suit your flight needs, but they are quite pricey. Now, I can get you 5% off anything at MONSTERTECH, including the chairs, when you use the code SMB at checkout. Be sure to follow the link in the description. I know it's not much, but when you're spending that much, it will certainly help. Plus, doing so, you are supporting my content and channel, as I do get a direct kickback. So thank you in advance if you choose to do so. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.